So be it. Today's lesson is entitled, Nothing Stands Alone. Have you ever thought about how nothing truly stands alone? We're all interdependent with each other, with nature, with our communication systems, and so much more. How many of you have ever been to the Rocky Mountains? How about the Great Lakes? How about New England? Then you've probably seen aspens in those. The aspen trees develop this root system. Then on those root systems, there's suckers, and the suckers come up and it creates more trees. And they form a huge grove, or what is known as a colony. And as a result, the aspen branching patterns create these tall, tall trees that are all together in this colony. And they have like a pyramid shape and crown because these trees closer to the mother tree are taller, and as they go out, they get shorter. So they're like a huge pyramid. Now the roots can grow out as long as 30 feet and below the surface. And individual trees can live 150 years. However, the root systems live longer than what the original tree does. They can grow between 50 and 100 feet in height, and the diameter will be anywhere from 3 inches to 18 inches. While aspen can be grown individually, they typically grow, as I stated, in colonies. And why these trees grow best when they do not stand alone, we don't know. Other trees are not the only ones that depend upon the aspen for their growth and their nutrients. Animals are extremely dependent upon the aspen. Beavers use their bark and their leaves and their twigs from these trees as food, and of course the branches create their homes. Other mammals depend upon the trees for food, including elk and moose and deer. Rabbits and muskats eat the bark, and birds consume seeds and the flower buds. Yellow belly sapsuckers, look that one up on the web. And hairy woodpeckers, who's ever heard of a hairy woodpecker, hollow out parts of those trees to create their nests and their homes. These few examples do not even introduce other living organisms, including man, who depends upon it for fuel and for hunting of the animals that live within those groves. Nothing in our universe stands alone. Nothing is all by itself. Truly, there is unity in our connectedness with each other. In December of 2012 in Spain, a Kenyan runner by the name of Abel Mutua was only a few meters away from finishing the marathon race. He was first in line. He had run that fast for over 26 miles, and he became confused with the signs because they were all in Spanish. And he stopped to think on the race, thinking a few feet from that finish line that he had completed the race and that he had won. And there was a man by the name of Ivan Fernandez that was right behind him. And he started shouting at him to go, to move, to go forward, to get to the end of the race. And of course, Mutua didn't know any Spanish whatsoever. Fernandez realized what was happening for Mutua, that he was confused, and he came up and he grabbed him and he started to push him forward towards the finish line. And of course, Mutua won the race because of the efforts of Ivan Fernandez. And a reporter afterwards went to Ivan and said, "What did you do that for? You could have won the race." And Ivan looked at the reporter and he said, "My dream is that one day we can have some sort of community life where we push ourselves and also others to win. Note the word community. Community is about unity and oneness. And the reporter wouldn't let this go because he insisted, but why did you let the Kenyan win? And Ivan looked at him and he said, I didn't let him win. He had already won the race. And the reporter insisted again and again, but you could have won, don't you understand? And Ivan looked at him and he said, but what would be the merit of my victory? What would be the honor of this medal? And above all else, what would my mother think? Not only did Fernandez show his values by pushing Matua forward and into the finish line, he also gave an example of how none of us truly stand alone. Numerous authors have written about unity. Here's just a few. Merrill Heller, with all of the bad things that are happening in the world right now, I think we need a message of togetherness and true unity. I believe that starts with the personal reflection, and then we can find kindness towards each other. Or from Emmanuel Cleaver, there is more power in unity than there is in division. Regardless of our beliefs, our race, our income, our nationality, our religion, we are united. We are all one, even though there are those who want nothing to do with us because of our beliefs. We are interdependent, just like the aspen trees that live in colonies. To look at ourselves as separate entities is to live in duality, to live in separation. We need to only look at the dividedness within our nation, within our country right now. If it doesn't scare you, I don't know what will. We're divided by our beliefs and our fears about immigration, about religion, and pro-life versus a woman's right to choose. And by the way, I have my Ruth Gator Ginsburg socks on today. What books should our children read? How should American history be taught? Rather further separates us. Guns and politics keep us living in fear and divide us further. A democracy that has survived 248 years, but it's showing signs of duality and stress. The United States of America is currently the oldest democracy in existence in our world. However, some historians suggest that the Native American Six Nation Confederacy, which is the Iroquois Nation, which traces its consensus-based government tradition across 8 centuries, is the oldest living participating democracy. How much longer will our country survive if we cannot come together in oneness and unity? It would appear that our inability, or should I say refusal to understand and refusal to listen to each other, keeps getting in our way of coming together as a united people. Earlier this year, my college roommate and I were catching up with each other on one of our lengthy telephone calls. She lives in Connecticut and I live in California. We've known each other now for over 60 years, and I treasure Joan. Now, you have to understand that Joan is definitely a conservative, while I tend to be a moderate. As always happens, we went from catching up on our lives to the current state of affairs in our nation, a topic we can never ever seem to avoid. At some point in our sharing, she began to tell me a story about her mother. When they would become involved in lengthy conversations about something controversial, Maria, Joan's mother, would always remind her that she had strong feelings and opinions about things like divorce and abortion because of her background. You see, Marie grew up Catholic, and her parents divorced at a very early age. And I doubt that any of us can imagine the pain that caused her in the 1920s. Catholics just did not get divorced back then. As a child, Marie was challenged and belittled through school, her friendships, and in church by the decision that her parents made, not her. Remember the old adage, guilt by association? And so she believed that unless there were issues of abuse or something horrific in a marital relationship, you stayed together. Marie would always give Joan permission to not adopt or embrace her points of view or her beliefs or values. She would, however, ask her to try and understand how she felt. And just how would she do that? She would ask for her to simply listen. Marie realized these were her beliefs based on her experiences as a child. These experiences created a foundation for her beliefs and her values. She did not expect others to adopt them or to share them because they belonged to her, not to anyone else. Marie did, however, expect to be heard and understood by others. So just how do we become like Marie? And what do we do? Well, we do it with willingness to listen and an understanding that indeed we are entitled to our opinion because it belongs to us and no one else. And just how do we return to a place of love? How do we know deep inside that we need each other and indeed are connected by oneness? I love the quote from Ephesians 4:2. With all humility and gentleness and with patience, forbearing one another in love. Endeavor to preserve the harmony of spirit and the bonds of peace, that you may become one body and one spirit. One body, one spirit. So how do we get to this place of humility, of gentleness and patience, as well as holding each other in love and oneness? The people we tend to like are the people who show us respect that we think we deserve. Usually the people we do not like are the ones we feel and believe don't like us. Also, we tend to shy away from those who don't share our beliefs and values. We don't feel connected to them because we are different from each other. I hate to tell you how many of my friends deleted their friends on Facebook because of who they voted for in 2016 and the 2020 election, because of how they voted. What a petty thing to do. It is time to see the good others bring to our relationship rather than just focusing on how they believe or how they voted or what they do. If we expect respect, then we must offer it also. This will prompt unity and harmony within our relationships. With kindness comes gentleness. Merriam-Webster's dictionary describes gentleness as meekness, as being deficient in spirit and courage. It is too often viewed as a weakness. The Greek meaning of gentleness is the image of power under control. Interesting dynamic. And when you think of being meek, think about the rushing waters not too far from here on the dam and the turbines of that dam that create energy for us. Instead of running wild out of control, destroying everything in its path, the same water is used to control electricity. Its force is used for good. Gentleness or meekness is power under control. People who remain calm and peaceful when surrounded by heated atmospheres do not lose their cool. Instead of blurting out their feelings and opinions in anger and frustration, they know to control themselves and to use this power within to serve others. Regardless of how frustrated we become, we must find patience within. For unity to develop, we need to be patient with one another. I love what Joyce Meyer said once. Patience is not simply the ability to wait, it's how we behave when we're waiting. Do you stand at the counter waiting for my meal, or are you patient? Regardless of how frustrated we become, we must find the patience within. And how do we listen? Is our brain busy and trying to construct how you'll respond to someone, or do you genuinely listen? Listen to what they're saying. You see, listening requires patience. Only then will we truly hear what the other person has to share. It is through listening that we learn. In order to connect, we must let go of our assumed judgments of others. In the book, The Light We Give, author Simran Singh shares the story of an experience he had on a flight to Detroit. Simran is a Sikh and wears a turban to cover his hair. He was already seated when an older white gentleman walked onto the plane and saw he was sitting next to him. The man gave a heavy, heavy sigh and proceeded to take his luggage and jam it into the overhead on top of the bag that carried Simran's suit. And so Simran stood, he moved his bag to another bin and then returned to his seat. As he did so, he noticed the man was watching on his telephone a right-wing news channel. Every time it showed another image of a refugee in a detention camp, he'd shake his head furiously. Simran showed discomfort at that point. He began to totally worry. Am I safe on this flight based on who I'm sitting next to? Simran decided to strike up a conversation to play it safe. Where are you headed? He asked. Back to Detroit, came the response. Work or family? Headed home, but not for work. Simran nodded his head and invited him to share more if he wanted to. He accepted, and within the minutes of small talk, the man shared he was returning from chemo treatment and that he felt utterly and totally defeated by the cancer. Simran's heart just absolutely sank. The man may have had a stereotype about Simran, but he also had a stereotype about the white older man. They had both let each other down. They spent the next few hours sharing a deep conversation that reflected on their life and on death. They shared what they believed and how they wanted to live in life. Bit by bit, a sick, frightened white man and a bearded, turban-wearing Sikh had forged a connection. Simran never knew if their conversation ever changed the man's opinion of other races, religions, or immigrants. What he does know, however, is that in their effort to find common ground, they found a connection, a unity, and that in those few hours, they were one together. Nothing stands alone. We are all dependent on each other for our existence, just like the aspen trees. We can live in unity and love through our willingness to be kind, to listen and with patience and a gentleness by releasing our judgment of others. Or we can continue to think there is us and them, or right and wrong way to believe that will continue to divide us and to divide our nation. In India, there is an old tale about the sun setting. As the sun narrowed on the horizon, the light on earth slowly diminished, and soon darkness came to the land, and people were initially afraid that when the sun went down, it would never come up again. It would be permanent. And fear continued to rise up within the people, and they questioned, what will happen to me? What will happen? Far across the land, in a small little hut, a little lantern lifted its wick. It said, I challenge. In my small corner, I will not let the darkness settle around me. And soon other lanterns joined in and lifted their wicks to the darkness. And the people watched in amazement as the little lanterns illuminated the earth. Their efforts prevented the darkness from taking over. The lanterns did not seek to end the darkness. They were humble enough to know that that was not a reasonable objective. Instead, each lantern focused on what they could do individually in their small corner of the world. By doing their part, each lantern, tiny light inspired another and another and another to do the same. They each modeled a way forward in life. Each of us has an opportunity to be a light of unity and love and compassion in our corner of the world. It is our connection that creates unity. It is our willingness to reach out in uncomfortable situations. It is our willingness to let go of stereotypes that will allow us to live in unity and as one. After all, nothing stands alone. This is the truth in my life, and this is the truth in yours. And so it is. Amen.
Very much. That was wonderful.